I'm going to be doing a little bit of seed sowing today, and so I thought I'd bring you along and show you the different techniques that I use. So first of all, I'm going to be sowing some larger seeds. Today I've got nasturtiums, which are a really valuable edible flower, and I've got some Kelvedon Wonder peas. So with big seeds like this, particularly the peas and beans, it is of great value to soak them overnight first, and you can see these have plumped up beautifully. So what you do with this size of seed, I'm going to sow the peas in slightly larger modules. So we'll do the nasturtiums first. I'm going to tip these out so I can do it with one hand. And into every one of these compartments, I'm going to make a little hole and just put the seed in. So generally speaking, seeds need to be about the depth in the soil that related to the size of the seed. So they need to be covered with about the same depth of soil as the largest dimension of the seed. So there we are. You can see that's going to be a lovely quick job to get a whole tray of nasturtiums sowed. And those are going to brighten my garden up. They're going to provide me with a variety of interesting flavours, because the flowers and the leaves have slightly different flavours, both spicy. And then these seeds, when they seed at the end of the season, you can pickle them and use them instead of capers to brighten your salads up in the winter time as well. Okay, so that's nasturtiums. Just get that row finished so I know where to come back to, and we'll move on to a different sort of seed. Okay, so this little tray here I've got prepared with some of the seed compost that we made the other day, if you were there with me. Okay, so on the one end of that I'm going to sow some lettuce seeds, and in the other end I've got some kohlrabi as well. I'm just going to have to stop filming for a minute while I actually get the packet open. So here's my kohlrabi seed. I'm just going to sprinkle that carefully down one end of my seed tray. Fantastic. And then at the other end I'm going to put lettuce. Now I would never plant two different sorts of cabbage family plants in the same tray, because you can't actually tell which is which when they're little seedlings. But lettuce and kohlrabi aren't related, so we'll be able to tell them apart quite easily when they come up. Okay, so just a little sprinkling of soil over the top, enough to bury the seeds to about their own depth. Fabulous. And then we're ready to move on to my big pots. Now these ones are for ones that are going to grow in the same pot until they're planted out into the garden. I use this size, generally speaking, for pumpkins and squashes. And I've got some very nice pumpkins and squashes here today. I've got some Lady Godiva, named after Lady Godiva of Coventry, who, as it turns out, was an activist. The reason she was riding naked through the streets of Coventry was because her husband had said that if she did something as outrageous as that, then he would treat the poor people better. Yeah, so good on her, eh? So anyway, so Lady Godiva pumpkin seeds are so named because they do not have any clothes on. They haven't got any shells, which means that their viability is not as good as you would expect from the usual pumpkins, but it's absolutely great when they come up. And the flesh of the pumpkin is very good as well. So I'm going to plant one of those in there, cover it up, and then we've got 100-weight. This is great fun for the kids because it grows absolutely ginormous. You can make the most fantastic Halloween pumpkins out of it, but it's also quite good for sharing if you're a member of a community organisation or something like that, the way that I am. So hopefully by the time these 100-weight pumpkins are grown, we'll be able to meet each other again. Okay, so that's sowing in the greenhouse. Let's go and do some sowing outside. So here we are in my new garden plot. and as you can see at this time of the morning it's still quite shady. So I've just made a little slot in the ground to put the peas in, and it's so easy. You just sprinkle them along your slot. You can see they're falling quite thickly. I'll spread them out a little bit. If you find when your plants come up that they're too close together, you can always weed one or two out. There we go. And now we're going to just cover them up gently. Again, to about the depth of the seed. Now, if you're lucky enough to have an allotment or something like that, you're probably going to have to protect your peas when they come up, because pigeons and other birds are very fond of eating fresh pea shoots. Well, just like humans are actually. And they are utterly delicious, and you can see why the pigeons would like them. So what you're going to have to do is you're probably going to have to put something over the top, so that when your young peas come up that they're not just eaten. Also, also more common on allotments is the peas in the ground being dug up and eaten by mice. So some people just lay a piece of netting across the row once they've sowed it. In the garden, you're probably going to have quite a population of cats in the area, which means that you're less likely to suffer from danger of your peas being eaten either by mice or by pigeons. Don't forget to mark and label your rows so that you know what you've got. I'm very bad at doing that myself, and then the next year I think, oh, what were those peas that were so delicious? And I can't remember for the life of me what variety they were. Or those carrots were absolutely pathetic, and again I've got no way of avoiding that particular variety the next year. So you can plant at this time of year. You can put most of your seeds straight outside into the ground. I like to do it in the greenhouse and plant them out, just because I'm not able to go to my allotment every day and make sure that things are adequately watered, and I'm also not able to protect them from all the various dangers of slugs and mice and pheasants and pigeons that I get at the allotment. So I like to do them in my greenhouse. But if you're available for keeping a closer eye on stuff, then why on earth not do it straight into the ground? Save yourself a lot of bother. So you can do this kind of thing for onions and leeks. You can do it for cabbage family plants. You can do it for pretty much anything. So typically there's a couple of things I forgot to mention. Firstly, you can see the soil that I've got here on my newly dug bed is quite coarse, and that's because I've got clay here. So these lumps here are rock hard lumps of clay, not ideal for my little seedlings, and especially if you're growing fine seeds, something that grows from fine seeds like brassicas. You'd want to cover them up with fine material to make sure that poor little tiny seedling doesn't have to push through anything too hard. So I'm going to be covering these up with some much finer soil than you can see here. Secondly, another thing that I forgot to mention is, of course, when you're sowing brassica seeds, if it's going to grow into a plant that grows really big, like sprouting broccoli, let's say, or like a sprout plant, what you do is you sow them into a little space like this. You'll probably only need a few seeds if you're going to grow sprouts, unless you really like sprouts. And then what you would do is, once the plants are big enough and tough enough, you'd plant them out into their final position. and that means that you can be using the part of the garden where you would be growing your sprouts at this time of year. You can be using it to grow short growing stuff like lettuce and radishes, and enjoy 2 uses of the ground during the year. Secondly, of course, I didn't point out that when you've planted your seeds, naturally you need to give them some water. So here we are, giving them a good watering, and the soil should stay damp while your seedlings are coming up. Not so crucial with peas and beans if you've given them a good soaking, because they've got water actually within the seed. But if you're sowing something like lettuces or kohlrabi, as I've been saying this morning, they're going to need some water. And of course your peas and beans will be happier for it anyway. And the last thing that I forgot to mention was back in the greenhouse. So let's go and quickly have a look over there. Now, you may have asked yourself why I was sowing my kohlrabi and lettuce into my own homegrown seed compost, whereas I was sowing the nasturtiums and the pumpkins and squashes into shop-bought compost. And the reason for that is this seed compost, which I made the other day, is specifically for growing seeds in. So it only contains a low level of nutrient. So what will happen is, once those seeds have grown to about this stage, I'll be potting them on into something which is a little bit richer and has more nutrients in for them. Whereas my squashes are going to remain in this same compost until I plant them out onto the allotment. And so they need something that is a bit of a better mix. So if it was compost that I was making myself, I'd make sure that there was a bit more of my garden compost from the compost heap in there, a higher proportion of that kind of lovely rich stuff. Okay, I think that's all the loose ends tied up, and I'll get on with the rest of my sewing on my own.